Sets us up for a fairly unsettled few days as we start 2024.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome. Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. It's the era of thought crime. Police Scotland record 3,800 non-crime hate incidents in 1 year. Is it time to consign Orwell's dystopia to the world of fiction? As it's revealed a record 2.6 million people are off work because of long-term sickness, is it offensive for bosses to offer running club memberships to their staff? Are trans athletes stealing medals from female competitors? Biological men competing in women's sport is an issue that just won't go away. When will the madness end? Ricky Gervais has fallen victim to a woke pile-on over the festive season, including from his fellow comics. So what does this say about the state of comedy and society today? And as it's announced, the UN have sent 153 migrants to Rwanda, despite thwarting Britain's own deal and telling us Rwanda isn't safe. Is this hypocrisy of the highest level? All this and more after the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. New Year's plans have been ruined for thousands of people after Eurostar cancelled all trains to and from London, causing travel chaos. The company apologised after a tunnel was flooded, apparently caused by a burst pipe connected to the fire safety system. Up to 35,000 passengers have been affected, with many left stranded at London's St Pancras station. Eurostar says services will be up and running tomorrow after flooding in the tunnel was brought under control, although speed restrictions may lead to some delays. And forecasters are warning people to take care ahead of New Year celebrations. Heavy rain and strong winds are expected in many parts of the country, with parts of Scotland likely to see significant levels of snow. The Met Office says yellow alerts are in place until 3 a.m. tomorrow. A third man has died following a house fire in South London. Emergency services were called to an address on Sandstead Road in Croydon just before 11 o'clock last night. 2 men were pronounced dead at the scene. The Met Police say a third man, believed to be in his 30s, died later in hospital. Another man is in a life-threatening condition in hospital, while a 5th person has been discharged. The cause of the fire is still being investigated. Ukraine has struck a series of targets in Russia, killing 14 people and injuring more than 100 others. It comes after Russia carried out its most devastating air attack since the invasion began. Ukraine says the brutality of the strikes, which killed 31 people, shows there can be no talk of a truce with Moscow. Russia requested a meeting of the United Nations Security Council today, despite most members condemning Russia's actions at an emergency gathering last night. The UK's representative, Barbara Woodward, says Russia is deliberately targeting civilians.
These missiles were aimed at population centres across Ukraine, at Kyiv, Lviv, Dnipro, Odessa, Kharkiv, Kamytsky, and many more cities. They struck homes, apartment buildings, shopping centres and metros. A maternity hospital and a regional oncology centre have been damaged. In short, civilian infrastructure.
And the British actor Tom Wilkinson has died. Born into a farming family in Yorkshire, he won fans for his role in the classic comedy The Full Monty. He was nominated for an Academy Award twice, and he took home a Golden Globe in 2009 for his portrayal of Benjamin Franklin in HBO's acclaimed miniseries John Adams. Singer Will Young has paid tribute to him as British acting royalty. Tom Wilkinson was 75. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News.
Welcome to GB News Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. Coming up on tonight's show, it's the era of thought crime. Police Scotland record 3,800 non-crime hate incidents in 1 year. So is it time to make Orwell fiction again? And it's revealed a record 2.6 million people are off work because of long-term sickness. Is it offensive for bosses to offer running club memberships to their staff? And are trans athletes stealing medals from female competitors? That's what former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis thinks. She'll join me live to call for an end to the madness, including in grassroots sport. Ricky Gervais has fallen victim to a woke pile-on over the festive season, including from his fellow comics. So what does this say about the state of comedy and society today? And it's announced that the UN have sent 153 migrants to Rwanda despite thwarting Britain's own deal and telling us that Rwanda isn't safe. So is this hypocrisy of the highest level? We've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 sharp with full reaction from my brilliant panel, political commentator and writer Benedict Spence, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, and former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. And they'll be telling us their heroes and villains from 2023. Plus, the most important part of the show, your views. gbviews@gbnews.com. Do email in and let me know your thoughts. Let's get started with this. You might recall a couple of weeks ago, the MP for Redditch and Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, Rachel McLean, was in the news because she had reposted a tweet which referred to Green Party candidate Melissa Poulton as, quote, a man who wears a wig and calls himself a proud lesbian. This happened to be a statement of fact, but this didn't stop the West Mercia police recording this as a non-crime hate incident. Many of you might not be aware of what a non-crime hate incident actually is. You might be thinking to yourself, is it really the police's job to be investigating non-crime? That would be like your doctor phoning you up and saying, I hear you're really well at the moment. And of course you would have a point. So where has all this come from? Well, I can tell you that it hasn't come from the government. In 2014, the College of Policing, the quango responsible for training police forces in the UK, introduced non-crime hate incidents. They didn't have a mandate for it, they just did it. The idea would be that even if someone hadn't committed a crime, signs of hate needed to be monitored in case these sentiments developed into criminal activity in the future. You might follow the lead of science fiction writer Philip K. Dick, who called this kind of thing pre-crime. Sounds a bit dystopian, doesn't it? What business does the police have in auditing our private thoughts and emotions? Well, in a free society, none whatsoever. How it works is this. If someone is insulted or feels offended and perceives that the slight is motivated by hate, they can contact the police and the person in question will have a non-crime hate incident recorded by their name. They usually won't be told about this and there is no evidential threshold required. In other words, the accuser doesn't have to prove hateful intent, it's just assumed. Hate is defined as being offensive against one of the 5 protected characteristics. You can find them listed on the websites of the Crown Prosecution Service and the College of Policing. These are race, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity and disability. And you'll note that these are different to the list of protected characteristics in the Equality Act, which also includes sex, but features gender reassignment rather than transgender identity. The law enforcement agencies are using a revised list of their own making. And this explains why threats against women for standing up for single-sex spaces tend to be ignored by the police, but people have been arrested for misgendering, in other words, for exercising their free speech. But you might say, look, no one has been arrested for non-crime hate incidents, and yet there are other implications to consider. There are certain jobs, teaching, for instance, in which a DBS or disclosure and barring service check is required. And if you have a non-crime hate incident against your name, it will show up, and you probably won't get that job. And even if that weren't the case, what about the principles of a liberal democracy? I can't be the only one who thinks it's deeply sinister and authoritarian to have the police recording lists of citizens who have committed wrongthink. It sounds like the stuff of fiction, but it is very much real. In the 5 years after the College of Policing introduced the policy, around 120,000 non-crime hate incidents were recorded in England and Wales. Estimates now suggest that that'll be knocking on for 250,000 by this point. And Rachel Maclean isn't even the first MP to have experienced this. In 2017, the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd had a non-crime hate incident recorded against her because she referred to migrant workers in a speech at the Tory party conference, and someone took offence and contacted the police. But mostly it's just regular people getting clobbered by this sinister practice. A man in Bedfordshire was slapped with a non-crime hate incident for whistling the theme tune from Bob the Builder at his neighbour, which for some reason was interpreted as racist. Other actions that have been recorded as hate incidents by police include a disputed line call in a tennis match, a dog defecating on someone's lawn, and a man saying that he was campaigning for Brexit. And the barrister, Sarah Phillimore, who has appeared on my show many times, was recorded as having committed a non-crime hate incident when she posted a satirical tweet which featured a picture of her puppy, along with the caption, "My dog will call me a Nazi for cheese." The point is that the police have no right to be doing this. According to the Law Society Gazette, it's not even lawful. And this has been tested in court. In 2019, former Constable Harry Miller was contacted by Humberside Police following a complaint by an offended party about a poem that he had shared on social media, which was deemed to be transphobic. Harry, being an ex-cop, knew something was amiss. He asked why the unnamed complainant was being described as a victim if no crime had actually been committed. And more to the point, he said, why was he being investigated at all? To which came the ominous response, "We need to check your thinking." Thought crime. That's a concept that readers of George Orwell will be familiar with. However, Harry Miller took the police to the High Courts with the help of the Free Speech Union, and in December 2021, the Court of Appeal ruled that, quote, "the recording of non-crime hate incidents is plainly an interference with freedom of expression." But by that point, the Home Secretary of the time, Priti Patel, had already instructed the police to stop recording non-crime hate incidents over hurt feelings. That was in April 2021. And then in March of this year, Home Secretary Suella Braverman published new guidelines reminding police that this is the case. But the College of Policing have merely fudged the language of their guidance and just carried on as before. So what does that tell us? Well, it would seem that the College of Policing has been ideologically captured. It is now an activist body. And this would explain why so many police officers seem to think it's their job to monitor the speech of UK citizens. The College of Policing has been told to stop it by successive Home Secretaries. They've been told it is unethical and unlawful by the High Courts, and still they persist. And at some point, it's got to stop. Surely it's beyond the point now when the College of Policing ought to be abolished and replaced with a service that observes the law rather than the demands of activists. I would have thought that by now non-crime hate incidents would be a thing of the past, but the activists within the College of Policing are used to getting their own way, and they're not going to give this up without a fight. Right, before I go to my panel, I want to give a bit of a right of reply to the College of Policing. So this is a statement they put out in June of this year. This was the Chief Constable Andy Marsh said, a new code and guidance are now in place for officers when responding to non-crime hate incidents. These incidents should not be recorded where they are trivial, irrational, or there is no basis to conclude that an incident was motivated by hostility. And yet, panel, they did in fact record a non-crime hate incident against Rachel McLean when there was no evidence of hostility. And you can see from their wording there, they're still going to do it. They're just going to modify the language. Emma, am I the only one who's disturbed by this?
No, and I didn't realise this had been introduced by the College of Policing without any mandate. I think it's deeply, as you say, deeply sinister, very alarming. This is truly the stuff of Orwellian kind of nightmares, if not, kind of dystopia. The fact that people are, well, that the accusers are unnamed and that you don't even know this stuff has been recorded against you. The fact that you're citing people whistling Bob the Builder, things like that, is absolutely ludicrous.
And, we could have non-crime hate incidents against us right now. You have to check in with the police. I haven't. I assume I have got a few against my name.
Exactly, you don't actually know.
Yeah.
We have to be clear about this. Either something, I don't agree with all this hate crime stuff anyway, but either it's a crime or it's not. This weird category of a non-crime hate incident, I think that's where it's weird and very, very alarming. And as you say, why are the police wasting time when we know the police are so overstretched, underfunded, all this stuff that they claim?
Yes.
Why are they investigating this? Why are they following this up?
OK.
When there's real crime to be
If I can ask, if I can have Matthew or Ben, does anyone have an opposing view? Does anyone here think that actually the police are well within their rights to investigate people for non-crime?
No.
Okay.
Sorry about that, but we're getting a bit of consensus.
Okay, there's a bit of consensus.
I come from, from the left of politics, but I think it is very worrying because, first of all, it seems to me it's a total cop-out for the cops. Rather than investigating real hate crime, rather than actually getting things right, when, as we've seen with so many cases where they haven't delivered for people within the 5 protected characteristics, whichever way that, you take, whichever 5 characteristics you take. And instead, it's just this is just ludicrous. It's judge and jury for a copper at the end of a phone who's enforcing something that hasn't been decided by Parliament. Parliament needs to be sovereign, not the College of Policing, which is a quango. And it's a training college.
It's also so vague. We have a situation where police forces are actually doing different things.
Yeah.
Some are doing it, some are not doing it, some are applying the rules in different ways. So, because there are no clear rules about this. Benedict, I come back to this point. Why won't the government just step in and say, this quango is no longer fit for purpose?
Your guess is as good as mine. This has been the theme of various iterations of the Conservatives since they came in to power, is that they say, oh, this isn't very good, and then they don't do anything about it. They assume that it will just stop if you say that it's bad, which is completely the opposite to the Labour Party, which comes in and says, this is our ideology, and you're sure that we're going to make sure that it is forced through. And I think that this really shows you the failure, the betrayal, frankly, of the Conservative Party towards its own voters, that they have allowed these things to fester for over a decade now. And the best that they can do is go, oh, it's a bit woke, it's not good, somebody should do something about it. As they're staring down the barrel of a general election to people, we're all sat here going, well, you did have the power, you were the government. Thanks so much.
Emma, can I come to you next? Because that's a really interesting point, because it's not just that particular quango. The civil service also has exactly the same problem. We've had a whistleblower recently talking about how whatever immigration policies the government wants to do, the civil service staff members will thwart it.
That the Home Office were never serious about immigration. They weren't behind any of the plans, and it's all a joke. But more seriously, what does this do to our heads? And it's not even about being Conservative voters. It's about the population in general. The Rachel McLean, the man in a wig comments. I think it was really, I know it was a couple of weeks ago, I think it's really, really worrying when people can see the evidence of their eyes and they're being told the opposite. It is Orwellian because you're being told the opposite of what we can all see, which was what 99% of people were saying, that is a man in a wig. Now, look, I support the right of every single person to love who they want, to dress how they want, to live exactly as they wish, and I think we should do that with love and acceptance. But when you are being told that a man who dresses in a wig, which is absolutely fine, is a woman, and we can all see that that they are not a woman. What does that do to people? I think what it does, it starts just to undermine the whole fabric of trust in authorities, of society, of laws, of all of this. It just makes one think, well, it's just ridiculous.
Well, that's an interesting point. I want to connect it to
We're
something
being
Matthew
told to
said.
say the opposite of what we can see.
Right, well, because Matthew, you raised the spectre of hate crime as a concept. Now, the problem that we have here is, as Emma's sort of saying here, is that actually hate, I mean, the idea of saying that is a man in a wig is being redefined as hate. The idea of women saying we want single-sex spaces is being redefined as hate. So is even the categorisation of hate crime fit for purpose if no one can agree what hate actually means?
Well, it's interesting that in these cases, an actual case for hate crime, which would actually go before a court rather than before a copper, at the, sitting in at the end of the phone line, would be tested. So, we have hate crime laws, we have, and yet none of these cases are taken under that because this isn't a law. As you said so clearly, this isn't a law. This is a mode of operation for the police. And what I think is extraordinary is it's a complete waste of money because as can be seen here, every single police force either has a directly elected mayor or a police and crime commissioner in England and Wales, and yet they don't seem to be stopping them. The Tories did well at the last police and crime commissioner elections. Loads of them are Tories. None of them seem to be stopping this.
Finally, Benedict, I just want to ask you about this because I mentioned the Equality Act, which has been sort of rewritten by the College of Policing to redefine so that the word sex is out of their list of protected characteristics, even though it is there in the Equality Act. And this is why feminists and women who are basically standing up for their rights, they never get any help from the police when they complain. They're just sort of demonised and smeared as transphobic or hateful or anything like that. So what can we do about an activist presence within such an important body, because it means that the police surely are not serving impartially?
You need to marginalise people, you need to sack them, you need to reform them, and the problem is that doing this sort of root and branch reform takes time, and that is, I'm afraid, I go back to the length of time the Conservatives have been in power. If you're going to take this sort of thing seriously, you need to take it in terms of this could take a decade to do, and it will need to be done on day one. And actually what we have not had is any sort of long-term coherent policy from this government on almost anything, certainly not on this. And it is a bit of a cliche, but they almost seem to enjoy, they almost seem to relish the fact that every now and then, I say every now and then, it's almost every day now, that some sort of story crops up somewhere about something woke happening. It's always that, the woke mob's gone mad, be it at university, be it in the College of Policing, be it at, hospitals putting people in different wards because they identify as a badge or whatever it is. They like that because then they can go, well, we have to rally against this. But are they going to do anything about it?
It's all happened under the Tories' watch. This idea that this is a left-right issue is actually completely false.
Absolutely.
So it's very interesting. Never mind, I'm sure Labour will sort this out. Anyway.
I'll see what I can do.
Coming up, are trans athletes stealing medals from female competitors? Biological men competing in women's sports is an issue that just will not go away. And next, as it's revealed, a record 2.6 million people are off work because of long-term sickness. Is it offensive for bosses to offer running club memberships to their staff?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. If you need a reason to keep the weight off in the new year, here's a new one for you. Job centres and bosses are referring people to running and therapy to keep them fit and healthy in a bid to tackle long-term sickness. So this is a part of a new Work Well scheme by ministers that's launching next year. People who seem at danger of falling out of the workforce will also be offered work coaches, physiotherapy and mental health support. So joining me now to debate this is a former Fat Families presenter, Steve Miller, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Welcome both to the show. Steve, can I come to you first? Do you think that this is the way to tackle the problem of people being out of work, is for employers to help them and the government to help them to just get healthier?
Well, I think the actual title of this debate is absolutely bloody ridiculous, frankly. I mean, we're talking about a running group, an employer offering a running group. Anyone would think, talking about being offensive, I mean, they're not offering naked leapfrog classes, for God's sake. That may be offensive. They're offering something that's positive, something that's healthy, something that's good for your physical health as well as your mental health. So actually, I think it's a great idea. I welcome it.
Rebecca, do you welcome it? Do you think this is the way to go?
I think it depends how you approach it. I think if you get back to work after Christmas and Karen from HR sidles up to you and says, listen, we've had a chat and we think you've put on a few pounds over Christmas, so we're sending you to the running club, that's obviously going to go down badly. Employers facilitating people to be able to take exercise during the working day, amazing. But realistically, the main thing that's getting people off work is things that require physiotherapy and mental health. And the wait list for physiotherapy on the NHS and for therapy on the NHS is unbelievably long, it's 3 years in some places. So yes, it's a lovely idea, but really having a little bit of a park run outside is not going to fix the massive work crisis that we have.
Yeah, but I mean, also, isn't it the case that really this kind of thing should be the responsibility of each individual human being, rather than having your employer sort of put pressure on you to run or to take exercise or to eat differently? Steve, don't you think really we should just let people live the lives that they want to live and stop interfering?
Oh, in many ways, we've become lazy arses in this country, frankly. I'm told I can say that because we're now at the watershed. However, I think it's about balance. I think, yes, we've got to support people, and I'm all for that, right? That's absolutely fine. But unfortunately, in the UK, unlike countries like Japan, where the individual does take a lot of responsibility, we really have fallen back on that, and we prefer often to stain a sofa with our arse. And that's frankly how it's become. And this measure, by the way, actually is something that the Japanese do. It's part of something that they do. Their obesity rate is around 6%. In the UK, ours is around 23%. That's because we've normalised obesity in the UK. And it's not about Steve Miller being cruel and fat-shaming. It's about being supportive, but also about being direct with people and saying to them, hang on a minute, you've got to own your body a bit more.
But Rebecca, it isn't really necessarily about exercise so much, is it? I mean, surely this really comes down to a matter of diet and the choices that we make in terms of nutrition.
Yeah, I mean, any qualified nutritionist will tell you that you can't outrun a bad diet and that you could go for a run every day, and that really wouldn't make a difference if you're eating particularly highly processed foods, a lot of sort of very seed oil based foods, particularly very bad, and convenience foods are particularly bad for you. We don't teach people how to cook. We don't give people necessarily the time to be able to cook nutritious food. It's a lifestyle issue, and there are a lot of reasons why a lot of people in this country are very overweight, but a lot of it is that it's a privilege to have the time to be able to cook healthy food and feed yourself in that way. And if you are broke, tired, overworked, you are likely to reach for very, very high energy food that you can shove in your mouth to give you a burst of energy.
I think that's a really good point. Steve, I want to bring that to you, because surely poorer families, they're going to go for the convenient, quick. They've got, they haven't got much time. They're working all the time. They haven't got much money. Some of the cheaper foods tend to be the worst for you. So surely you're talking about the obesity rate increasing, but isn't that inevitable when people's choices are limited?
No. We're not. I'm not going to allow that to be an excuse. Everyone loves to say that, we're all fat because healthy food's too expensive. The Institute of Economic Affairs did a study on this some time ago, and they found out, it actually is cheaper to eat healthily. Yes, of course, you have to look deeply in the supermarkets to find the bargains. I get that. And I do think that the supermarkets could do more when it comes to promoting affordability of healthy food. But what we're lacking in this country, and this debate is going down that route, is aspiration and inspiration to encourage people, no matter what their income, in terms of the solution, that they can do something about it, that they don't have to live a miserable life and being paranoid because they're too fat. There is something they can do about it. And that's what I'm all about.
Go on, Rebecca.
Nobody wants to be bigger. Like, if you said to any woman I know, and I'm better on women than I am with men with this, any woman I know, if you said to her, would you like 2 extra years of lifespan or to be a size 10 for the rest of your life, she'd pick being a size 10. People want to be thin. It's not a lack of desire. If it were easy, everyone would do it, but it's a lack of education. Personally, I lost about 40 pounds after I had my daughter, and that was because I worked out that I needed to do intermittent fasting. I have PCOS, I'm insulin resistant, but I was a 31-year-old woman with 2 degrees and access to a nutritionist. And it took proper diagnosis to understand what was going on. Most people don't have access to do that. It's not easy, and I think the idea that we can somehow make people feel sad and ashamed, so they punish themselves into being thin.
It's not about that. No, it's not. It's not about that at all. It's not about that at all.
With the greatest respect, Steve,
Steve, can I just ask you very specifically about that, Steve? Before you go on, can I just ask you specifically? I think Rebecca's implying that that the shame element here is perhaps not helpful. Do you take a different view, or do you understand that shaming someone for their body shape is just going to make matters worse?
I'm not talking about shaming. What I'm talking about is giving people solutions and being direct with people about taking action to get those solutions, rather than what your other guest seems to be doing, which is just talk. All your other guest is talking about is the problems and telling everyone how difficult it is. Well, by the way, if you're poor, you're going to be fat forever.
Right,
I think
Rebecca,
that's a terrible.
I'm coming to Rebecca now on that one. A chance to respond there, Rebecca.
No, it's all right. I just questioned. I'm surprised to hear you saying that you don't believe in fat shaming, because you do historically have called people butterballs and fatties and lard asses and things, which feels very much like fat shaming. And the best sort of research about maintaining weight loss comes out of a Scandi university, which showed that the better your opinion of yourself is, the more likely you are to lose weight and keep it off. So hating yourself, and particularly nasty nicknames,
so wouldn't there be a way, Steve, for us to sort of inculcate the kind of encouragement that you're talking about without resorting to smears or slurs?
No, it's called having a sense of humour. And it's also about encouraging people through humour. And if you look at the science of humour, you will see that there is a great correlation between humour and motivation. And that is why you will see a lot of the time why the results that I drive people to achieve are pretty phenomenal. So when people come on and say, oh, you're saying this, oh, you're saying that. Oh,
I'll come to you in a minute, Rebecca.
Rebecca, you need to loosen up, darling. Honestly.
Okay, Rebecca, is this a case of just...
Large.
1 second, Steve. Is it just a case of, as Steve says, a sense of humour? Or, as you and I know, every bully in the playground uses humour as a weapon?
Yeah, I mean, I like a joke as much as the next person, but I don't think that the sort of low-level, accessible childhood insults are necessarily the height of wit, but we all have different senses of humour. I don't think it's necessarily about loosening up. I think this is a very real issue. The burden on the state of people being unable to work is massive. The burden of people being physically incapacitated by their wage is massive. So I don't think it's necessarily about needing to lighten up. I think it's about not wanting to taunt people. And I looked into some of the people who were on Steve's programme over the last decade, and the vast majority of them all gained back all of the weight plus some. And that is a very continual issue with weight loss, one that I'm very aware of as somebody who's lost a lot of weight. So I don't think that the method of shouting insults at people is necessarily working, but let's hope the running clubs might.
Yeah, maybe. OK, well, that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. But Steve Miller and Rebecca Reed, thank you both ever so much for joining me tonight. And coming up with my panel, the CEO of Aviva has been given a damehood. And you know the one I mean, the one that personally vets white male recruits. So, is Britain rewarding positive discrimination? Plus, should you be sacked for what you get up to in your sex life? You do not want to miss that story. Back in a moment.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. You've been getting in touch with some emails, so let's see what you've got to say about the topics we've been discussing. So we've got this one from Chris. Hi, Andrew. Is it time we cancelled George Orwell for writing a handbook for authoritarians? It's an interesting point. And that book, you know, was published at the same time, in the same year as the establishment of North Korea. Christopher Hitchens often used to point out that maybe they were using it as a handbook. But anyway, there's this one from Diane. The police will arrest someone for non-hate crime, but won't deal with shoplifters, burglaries, etc. They seem to have become lazy and don't want to deal with real crime. Love the show, Andrew. Thank you, Diane. I think that's absolutely right. And in fact, I was in New York quite recently, and I was told in one particular shop that they'd locked everything away, even small items like shampoo, because apparently the police will not arrest anyone unless they steal more than $1,000 worth. So, yeah, this seems to be happening across the board. We've also got this on the fat-shaming issue from Gareth. The best way to get some people back to work is to give them a good kick up the backside. I'm not saying that applies to all people, but quite a few nonetheless. Also, healthy food is cheaper than junk food. Maybe, Gareth, I'm not so sure. But it does feel like violence is never the solution. Just a tender encouragement is what I'd say. Well, still with me are my panel for tonight. I've got political commentator and writer Benedict Spence, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, and former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. Now, the Aviva boss who told MPs that all senior white male recruits had to be personally signed off by her has been awarded a damehood in the New Year's Honours List. So this is Amanda Blanc, which is a kind of an ironic name, has been recognised for services to business, gender equality and net zero. But should this kind of divisive, discriminatory behaviour be awarded with such high prestige? So what does the panel think? Matthew, I'm going to come to you first.
So, look, I think it proves that the honour system is pretty rotten and broken, that we're dishing out gongs for somebody just for having, you know, been the chief executive of Aviva for a couple of years. I mean, I think there was a sensible policy behind what she was trying to do, which is to check that a full and diverse recruitment procedure has been gone through, and it isn't just, you know, another white bloke who's been doing it. But it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a white bloke. It means it shouldn't just automatically be a white bloke.
But wouldn't the people responsible for the recruitment have already just decided it's going to be a meritocracy, we're just going to appoint the best person? Because by implication, what Amanda Blanc is saying is that she's got a load of racists working for her.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely cack-handed. And if she's a good chief executive, as you say, she should be employing people who do find the best person for the job without her having to double-check and sign it off.
I would have thought.
So therefore, I mean, I think so in terms of the gong, I think she doesn't really deserve it. But I mean, it just reminds me of how rotten the whole thing is.
OK, Benedict, does she deserve the gong?
No, I think ultimately I'm a bit of a Darwinist when it comes to this. I don't think we should have anything like diversity drives. I think it is all about meritocracy, and companies that don't appoint the best people for the best jobs will not do as well as others. They'll be outcompeted, and that ultimately is how you'll get diversity, by getting the best people for the best job that way. I think it's the fact that she's been awarded for services not just to business but also to diversity and also net zero is, you know, for somebody working in an insurance company, you just sort of sat there thinking, why on earth are we handing out gongs for the... You know, we all know that it's a bit of a scam anyway, the honour system, but since when, you know, the order of net zero, what on earth is this about? It flies in the face of reality, and I find it very frustrating, because I know we will all have a bit of a joke about it, but net zero is a sort of a strange fantasy twilight zone where even if we decide to go full on towards trying to mitigate human activity and impact on climate change, there is no world in which you can actually have zero carbon emissions. It is a fantasy. Why on earth are we trying to praise this and raise this?
Because it's doublethink, it's doublespeak, it's thought police. This net zero concept.
What do you think about this? Because even irrespective of where you stand on the net zero issue, it feels like these awards or these honours are effectively politicised. I mean, we've seen, you know, someone who gave £50,000 to Liz Truss's campaign suddenly gets a peerage.
Yeah, well,
they should have been set.
At this point, the Liz Truss honours list is a badge of... is an absolute badge of shame, isn't it?
But specifically on the case of this Aviva...
the honours system, as the others have said, is so discredited and pointless and crony-ridden and just an embarrassment that I actually almost don't care what this woman gets. And also, why on earth are we awarding a damehood to a former financier, to a successful financier who presumably has her career and her salary to say well done?
Yes.
Anyone using the word diversity at this point brings me out in a rash as well. So,
OK, well, look, I'm hoping...
Bit of a blank on my part.
We're getting a lot of consensus here, so I might just have to start playing devil's advocate in a moment, but let's see. So, pop star Dua Lipa has cancelled one of her upcoming music videos. She wants to remain sensitive to the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. The unreleased music video reportedly features scenes of explosions, fireworks and crowds fighting. And after a series of emergency meetings with her team, it was decided that it would be insensitive for the video to come out, despite being filmed a month prior to the start of the war. This comes after the fashion brand Zara had to shut stores due to pro-Palestine protests over their ad campaign. So, OK, Matthew, is Dua Lipa caving to the council mob before she's been cancelled?
I'm going to defend her here, no, because I think, look, it's a bit like when you work in TV and, you know, things have been filmed 6 months before and, you know, there's a plane crash, you don't put out the film about the plane crash 2 days later. It's just, you know, that's just common sense. So I obviously haven't seen this video because it has been withdrawn from the view of mere mortals like us.
Yes.
If it was full of images of war, nobody's saying it's took one side or the other. That's slightly different to the Zara and the M&S.
Yeah, I mean, the video wasn't set in Israel.
No, so it was just we thought we don't want to put back pictures of fighting in a time of war. Then that doesn't particularly regard me as being a woke cancellation.
I suppose there's always a war somewhere, isn't there? But you know, on the other hand, as Matthew says, you know, there are precedents for this. You know, if you think about during the Iraq War, BBC Radio wouldn't play Phil Collins' song "In the Air Tonight" because they thought that might evoke the idea of bombs.
That was just good taste.
No, they did. And similarly, there was an episode of Friends where they'd filmed a whole episode about which had a joke about a bomb at an airport. 9/11 happened that week, and they reshot the whole thing. I think, actually, that seems reasonable, doesn't it?
I mean, 9/11, I think, was a particularly visceral moment for the United States, and so I can understand why they would have been very oversensitive. But the BBC, the Radio 1 thing and Phil Collins, I think, is actually very funny.
Yeah.
That somebody actually went to that extent and thought, oh, no, somebody in Iraq might hear this and be rather upset. I think all of my only understanding of Dua Lipa, who she is that she's a very successful pop star who is very tolerant, very open, very progressive when it comes to the UK. Refugees welcome here, all that sort of thing. Diversity is our strength. But she is from an Albanian Kosovo background, and when it comes to that, she is something of a rabid ethno-nationalist. She's very keen that other countries should have absolutely nothing to do in the affairs of her particular enclave in the Balkans. And so there has always been a bit of a double standard there whenever I hear about whatever it is that she's talking about. When it comes to Israel-Palestine specifically, it is an issue that turns perfectly sane, balanced people completely irrational. And we see this with the marches to try to shut down Zara because I don't know why Zara's upset the pro-Palestinians at some point. You cannot bow to these things.
Yes.
You cannot conduct yourself in a way in the UK because of a foreign war that has nothing to do with us halfway around the world just because you feel that it might upset part of your fan base. If they're that easily triggered, they're going to get upset at many other things.
Okay, well, I mean, in terms of Dua Lipa's politics, she's not here to defend herself.
She's not.
You know, she's not returning my calls, so I don't want to speak about that. Emma, what do you make?
To be honest, look, I think the people of both Israel and Palestine have a lot more on their minds and on their plates to deal with right now.
Here or in America, like the responses of people.
Still, this is ludicrous. We are going to get to the stage where we are frightened to even open our mouths to use a single word, to think or to write or to film anything. She put out a very heartfelt and I thought very, thoughtful message on Instagram saying that her heart ached for the people of Israel and Palestine.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be enough? There is no connection between her video, from what we've read about it, and what happened on October the 7th.
Well, it's interesting because anything could trigger someone. No, this is the problem.
Anything could trigger someone. Oh, I've just come out of a terrible relationship and then I see a film with a very moving love scene or something like that. I mean, come on, we need to get some perspective here.
OK, well, look, coming up, I'm going to be showing you the Ricky Gervais material that has left the woke left in a bit of a spin. But first, is the Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis right that trans athletes are stealing medals from women? She's going to be joining me live next to make her case. That's not to be missed.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching GBN Tonight Live with me, Andrew Doyle. The think tank Policy Exchange has said that trans women should be banned from competing against biological females at grassroots sport. The report pointed to the staggering statistic that at least 3 Parkrun records are held by biological males. In May this year, Sean Longthorpe, who was living as a married man until 4 years ago, smashed the record in the 45 to 49 age category by a full 1 minute and 13 seconds. And reacting to the report, former Olympic swimmer Sharon Davis said trans athletes are stealing medals from women. I'm delighted to say that Sharon Davis joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Sharon. On that point, we do keep seeing these images of male athletes towering over females on the podium. It's not going away. Activists always said this is just a one-off thing every now and then. It's not really affecting women's sports. But that's not the case, is it?
No, it's not the case at all. I mean, we've seen, many people, including the likes of people like Leah Thomas, obviously, but there are 50 males that we know of at the moment in women's football, just in the UK. So the problem is that we know that males are bigger and stronger and faster. In fact, athletics records and swimming records, all of the best women's world records are beatable by 14-year-old boys. So puberty makes an absolutely massive difference, but it's also just the biology of being male. Even if you haven't gone through male puberty, you will be taller, you will have bigger hands, bigger feet, bigger lung capacity, stronger bone density, all sorts of different things that will give you an advantage. But what's important is that we're making some headway in elite sports, certainly in big sports like track and field and swimming and cycling. But now we are literally throwing all the pathways and all the young athletes onto to, just saying that they're not worth fair sport. So we've got about 14 million females in this country that participate in sporting activities, and 99.99% of them do not do elite sport. So about 1,000 women in the UK earn their living from sport, 11,000 men. So you already have a much smaller piece of the cake.
Yes.
And you mentioned, Parkrun there. Sport England give Parkrun about £5 million to discriminate at the moment against female athletes. And to me, that's wrong. So as taxpayers, we need to do something about this. This is our money. So tell our MPs that we want fair sport for females. We want a protected category. Everybody must do sport, Andrew. You know that. You know that I'm keen for everyone to do sport. I always have been. But it just needs to be fair and it needs to be safe. So we need to either create open categories where people can identify however they like and however they feel comfortable, or we need to create extra categories. But throwing women's sport under the bus is not the answer.
I really do like to play devil's advocate and try and express the other opinion. But in this case, it's very difficult to do that because it seems so blatantly obvious that sports should be segregated by sex. And that's what most people believe. So, but I would ask you, what do you think is going through the heads of these men who participate in women's sports? Aren't they even slightly ashamed of what they're doing?
I don't know. I don't understand, particularly something like Parkrun, where there are plenty of boxes that you can tick. There are boxes that says, I don't wish to announce my gender. I mean, you can run on the day however you want to, dressed however you want to, presenting however you want to. And I just think having to tick the correct box for your biology. I mean, you mentioned 3. The fact that we think there's closer to 20 Parkrun records that are held by males, and that's just here in the UK. This is happening at every level of sport across the whole world, in all different types of competition. Just last week, we were hearing about volleyball scholarships in America that were going to males that were supposed to be going to females protected under Title IX. And even today in America, and America and Canada do seem to be the worst offenders, they've now just said that men can self-identify into boxing. Now, in boxing, males hit 160% harder than females. Someone is going to get killed, and it's going to be a female. And to prove the obvious, the fact that we already know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about this is there is a consensus on this. I think you would struggle to find the average person in the street who would think it's a good idea to put men in women's boxing. So why is it the case, given that there's such an overwhelming consensus on this, can it be the case that so many sporting bodies seem to take the view of this tiny minority of activists?
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier in the programme, actually. The Equality Act has a lot to do with this. So we need clarity with the Equality Act. When it was written in 2010, it used the word sex, a protected characteristic, and everybody knew that it meant biological sex. That now has morphed into meaning anyone that has, a piece of paper that says they're female. That's not biological sex. Biological sex is biology. It is whether you have, female gametes, right? And that is it. And it's a very easy thing to screen for. We can do that at Olympic level. We used to do it for many, many years. In fact, I've got a little card that says that I'm female, as well as my 3 kids. So there are lots of ways that we can do this. But I think it's just about understanding that we need equality for females in sport, the same way we do in all the other areas. But biology is very relevant in sport. And to pretend that that's not the case is utterly ridiculous. And as you said, most people agree with this. I think there's been some bullying. I think Stonewall have misrepresented the law. I think they've often threatened to sue when they will not sue because the law will not protect that position. But they're dealing with young females who have been intimidated into not having a voice. And that has a lot to do with it as well. So
absolutely,
middle-aged women like me are coming out and speaking out. But it's very hard for the young ones to come out and speak out and to come together and together is their power, and that's what they need to do.
Well, thank goodness you are, Sharon Davis. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.
Now, and Happy New Year to everybody. Just before I go.
And to you. Thank you. Now, Natalie Washington of the group Pride Sports called the Policy Exchange report, quote, pseudo-scientific political propaganda, adding, women in particular want to know that they can turn up and be included in sport, not have to participate in onerous and invasive sex testing to run around a park with their friends. And a spokeswoman for Parkrun said, as a health charity, it is right that we continue to prioritise inclusion, enabling us to positively impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of people every single weekend. Coming up, Ricky Gervais has fallen for a woke pylon. Please don't go anywhere. We're going to be discussing that in just a few moments. Back in a minute.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of Weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to New Year's Eve, for most of us we're going to end 2023 on a fairly showery note, and for some in the south it's still going to be pretty blustery. So as we end Saturday, we've still got this area of low pressure really dominating proceedings. This cold front will continue to spread its way eastward across the country. Some fairly heavy rain on it and some strong and gusty winds. It will become quite slow moving across the very far north of Scotland as we go through the course of the night. Then behind it, it is a mixture of clear spells and a scattering of showers. In the clearer skies, it will turn quite chilly, but I think most of us frost-free away from Scotland. So into New Year's Eve, any overnight rain will quickly clear the far east of England, and for many of us it's a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some of the showers, especially come the afternoon, will be heavy and thundery, but the rain across the very far north of Scotland, especially for Shetland, really just staying there all day. For many, a slightly cooler day than today, but still not doing too badly for the time of year. Looking ahead to New Year's Day, for many northern areas, it's a mixture of some bright spells, but a scattering of showers once again. Further south, a much drier and brighter day. A brief respite in the weather before, unfortunately, further rain comes in later on in the day, and that sets us up for a fairly unsettled few days as we start 2024.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. Coming up this hour, Ricky Gervais has fallen victim to a woke pile-on over the festive season, including from his fellow comics. So what does he say about the state of comedy in society today? And it's announced the UN have sent 153 migrants to Rwanda, despite thwarting Britain's own deal and telling us Rwanda isn't safe. Is this hypocrisy? We've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 p.m. sharp, with full reaction from my brilliant panel, plus their heroes and villains of 2023. All this and more after the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. New Year's travel plans for thousands of people may be back on course after Eurostar announced all of its services will resume tomorrow. The train operator says flooding in tunnels under the River Thames was brought under control. It added there could still be delays, though, due to speed restrictions. Earlier, the company apologised after a tunnel was flooded, apparently caused by a burst pipe connected to the fire safety system, leaving trains to and from London cancelled. Up to 35,000 passengers have been affected, with many left stranded at London St Pancras station. And forecasters are warning people to take care ahead of New Year celebrations. Heavy rain and strong winds are expected in many parts of the country, with parts of Scotland likely to see significant levels of snow. The Met Office says yellow alerts are in place until 3 a.m. tomorrow. A third man has died following a house fire in South London. Emergency services were called to an address at Sanderston Road in Croydon just before 11 o'clock last night. 2 men were pronounced dead at the scene. The Met Police say a third man, believed to be in his 30s, died in hospital. Another man is in a life-threatening condition in hospital, while a 5th person has been discharged. The cause of the fire is being investigated. Ukraine has struck a series of targets in Russia, killing 14 people and injuring more than 100. It comes after Russia carried out its most devastating air attack since the invasion began. Ukraine says the brutality of the strikes, which killed 31 people, shows there can be no talk of a truce with Moscow. Russia requested a meeting of the United Nations Security Council today, despite most members condemning Russia's actions at an emergency gathering last night. And the British actor Tom Wilkinson has died. Born into a farming family in Yorkshire, he won fans for his role in the classic comedy The Full Monty. He was nominated for an Academy Award twice, and he took home a Golden Globe in 2009 for his portrayal of Benjamin Franklin in HBO's acclaimed miniseries John Adams. Full Monty co-star Robert Carlyle paid tribute to him as one of the greats. Tom Wilkinson was 75. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News.
Welcome back. Coming up this hour, Ricky Gervais has fallen victim to a pile-on over the festive season online, including from some of his fellow comics. So what does this say about the state of comedy in society today? And it's announced that the UN has sent 153 migrants to Rwanda, despite stopping Britain's own deal and telling us that Rwanda isn't safe. So is that a hypocritical move? And we've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 p.m. sharp, and there'll be a full reaction from my brilliant panel. Tonight I've got political commentator and writer Benedict Spence, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, and former Labour advisor Matthew Laza, and they'll be telling us their heroes and villains from 2023. Plus the most important part of the show, your views. So please do email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's get started. Now, during the holiday season, many of us like to sit down and watch Christmas comedy specials, and Ricky Gervais's new Netflix show, Armageddon, appears to have annoyed all the right people. Let's have a look.
Well, I am woke now, and I can prove it. Here you go. I love illegal immigrants. The word queer used to mean someone who was attracted to the same sex as themselves, a gay man. Now, the word queer can mean a straight man who wants some attention.
But it turns out some other comics didn't appreciate Gervais's stand-up, including none other than Frankie Boyle.
Ricky Gervais, he does maybe 15 minutes where he goes, well, if a trans woman can say that they're a woman, I can say that I'm a chimpanzee. I'm a chimpanzee. And my genuine reaction was, it's not that much weirder than Ricky Gervais saying that he's a stand-up comedian.
So are Ricky Gervais's gags genuinely too offensive? And if so, can we say that comedy is dead? Well, let me know what you think. Just email me at gbviews@gbnews.com. First, let's hear from tonight's top panel, political commentator and writer Benedict Spence, author and journalist Emma Wolfe, and former Labour advisor Matthew Laza. I'm going to come to you first. Matthew, what do you make of it? Have you seen the special?
I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen the clips. I'm not outraged. I mean, first of all, Frankie Boyle criticising anybody over jokes, whether they're in good taste or not, is, you know...
Yeah, that's something,
I mean, it's quite something, to put it mildly. I mean, I think that, you know, Gervais was just the right side. They were fine. I'm not a particularly massive fan of his, but they weren't wildly offensive. I mean, goodness me, you know, I'm old enough to remember the days of Bernard Manning and etc. This really wasn't in that territory.
No, it's been very interesting to see the extent of the venom and ferocity online. It seems completely disproportionate. I mean, that clip from Frankie Boyle, I mean, he's actually referring to an earlier show by Ricky Gervais. It's an older clip, but that has resurfaced along with a clip by James Acaster criticising Ricky Gervais. That's resurfaced. But people are just using this to attack. But really, you know, why are they so angry? What I don't understand, Benedict, is if I don't like a comedian, I just won't watch the show, and the problem is thereby solved.
I think stand-up comedy is in a bit of a funk. I think it has been for some time, and I think it's sort of characterised by the fact that you've now got different comedians sort of calling each other out and criticising each other as part of their own routines, which I don't see why anybody would pay money to go and do that, you know, to sort of settle their own scores when, you know, they've got Twitter, or presumably they can pick up a phone and have conversations that way.
Yes.
I think that is a lot more what this is about, is that stand-up comics have become sort of characters, you know, personalities. It's not about the joke. You're not going to listen to somebody tell funny jokes. You're going to see Frankie Boyle. You're going to see Ricky Gervais. It's a lot more about celebrity. And with that comes, as we've been discussing throughout this on the programme, people having to say the right things. And if part of the discourse generally is about getting people to believe that black is in fact white, well, you're never going to get people, you know, sort of, you know, coming around sort of shared goals. The idea of the sort of a high trust society relies on sort of absolute truths that we can all agree on. Well, if you get rid of those, well, you're not going to have those people sort of coming face to face or agreeing with each other, and so then it descends into anger rather than
surely comedians
comedy.
shouldn't be, I mean, policing each other's jokes. I mean, look, of course, anyone has the right to criticise and to, you know, to criticise Ricky Gervais if they want to. He himself would welcome that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying comedians shouldn't be able to. What I'm saying is it's weird. It's weird to me that comedians do this.
It is very weird, but it is now because, as I say, they are celebrities, they are products, and now what they're doing is they're trying to signal to a certain audience, you can stick with me because we align with each other. Please give me your patronage, give me your business.
Are they, though? They seem quite genuinely angry to me.
That's what I think it is about. It's signalling.
Do you think that the comedians should just not weigh into other comics? There should be a sense of solidarity?
Well, you said, is stand-up comedy dead? To me, it's always been dead. I think stand-up comedy is the least funny thing in the entire world.
Maybe you're just not seeing the right stand-ups.
But I have to say, I'm delighted to disagree with my fellow panellists for the first time this evening. I thought that Ricky Gervais's gags about terminally ill children was really, really offensive. I was doing a radio programme that night, and a woman who has 2 terminally ill children rang up. She was absolutely in pieces. He made this joke about, you know, you giving a wish to a terminally ill children, and then he said, oh, but, you know, presumably they just would wish to not be terminally ill. And this woman was describing her 7-year-old and her 11-year-old son and daughter, who were both dying of very, very rare conditions. And I'm not one to get easily offended. I'm really not, but I just think he's
I didn't hear that. That sounds terrible. I've only heard the clips of the...
if you could give a terminally ill child one wish, and he massively overstepped the mark. I know what you're going to say, that he does lots of work.
No, that's not what I'm going to say. What I'm actually going to say is that the children...
It was not even funny. That's my test for comedy. Is it funny?
The children you're describing, though, are not the target of that joke. And I think that's
not the point.
I think that's really important that people understand.
No, that's absolutely not the point, Andrew. It's not a funny topic to make jokes about.
But some people
It's a bit like Frankie Boyle when he infamously made his jokes about disability.
A lot of people in the audience laughed, I know.
So therefore we can't have a criteria which says it has to be funny to be acceptable, because different people find different things funny.
You asked me what I thought. It wasn't funny. It's not a funny topic for conversation to listen to a mother talking about terminally ill children dying.
Yeah. It wasn't funny. Is it a topic of conversation that is approachable for any other art forms, though? Because in the previous section...
I don't think there's anything funny about it.
Well, in the previous section, we were talking about Dua Lipa, you know, trying to ward off the spectres of people getting very upset about Israel-Palestine by saying, oh, my heart goes out of this, that and the other. I don't want to offend anybody. Actually, where do we draw the why is comedy sort of not allowed to make jokes about things, but maybe a painter is allowed to paint.
One thing that's really important to understand, I think, is...
Because people are going to laugh at
Emma,
it.
I think we can all agree, though, Ricky Gervais does not find dying children funny.
So he shouldn't make jokes about it. No, I'm sorry. I'm absolutely 100% on this. It wasn't funny.
No, that's fine. You're free to criticise and you're free not to watch.
But he can make jokes about going to
Don't worry, I will never, ever watch a stand-up comedy or go to a stand-up comedy club in my life. When these clips are inflicted upon me and I'm asked my opinion, I think he massively overstepped the mark, and for me,
as I say, that's your opinion, and you're not very familiar with stand-up
I don't think I've ever cancelled anyone in my life, and he's cancelled. Well,
you're not cancelling him. You're just choosing not to watch him.
No, I'm cancelling him out of my life.
To be fair, Andrew, obviously, in the 80s when alternative comedy happened, it was comics policing other comics because, you know, the old school with the butt of jokes from people like Ben Elton and et al, weren't they? So, in a sense, every generation of comics has criticised previous generation of comics.
Interesting
but I'm not taking it for Frankie Boyle.
People here who think that there should be limits to comedy. Now, the problem with that is what you're doing is you're criticising a theatrical performance. To criticise the jokes that Ricky Gervais makes, because he's inhabiting a persona on stage, is kind of like criticising Macbeth for killing a king. It doesn't really make sense.
No,
but because he's not a character, he's
a joke is completely different to a theatrical performance.
Coming at this from, let's say, the Roman Catholic perspective, Dave Allen was very controversial when he was on television for some of the things he used to say about the Pope, and back in Ireland, that was verboten. You couldn't say these sorts of things. Father Ted came along a little bit later. Again, it used to poke fun at these sorts of things, and ultimately it eroded away the sanctity. Now, perhaps you can't equate ill children to the Roman Catholic Church, but for some people, there are totems and taboos. There are some things that you can't touch. It is important, if you wish, to be allowed to, at least try and see what you can get away with. Maybe it doesn't work, and you take the repercussions of that. But maybe it does. And I think it's important to say that people like Ricky Gervais do a very important job of trying to push boundaries.
But you can be criticised for it.
Is he not known for delving into those sensitive areas? So, like, if I had a particular sensitivity that I knew I would get upset by seeing someone joke about it, I would avoid the show. And there are so many comics who don't do.
So you want trigger warnings?
No, that's not a trigger warning. That's doing some basic research before you buy a ticket.
That's the same thing.
No, it's not at all.
Andrew, it's slightly different.
Because no one's saying this is what the content of the show is. I think that actually ruins the show if you're told what the content of the show is. I just know that if I'm going to get upset by edgy comedy, I'm not going to see Ricky Gervais, I'm not going to see Jerry Sadowitz. You know what I mean? I would.
But the mother that I spoke to, who had 2 dying children, wouldn't go and see Ricky Gervais. She was just deeply, deeply hurt, and she was in terrible pain. And maybe it's that I have a child and you guys don't. I don't know, but. And I'm not trying to do special pleading for the mother or anything.
I mean, it sounds to me...
But it was so painful it was so painful to listen to her that I'm afraid I didn't even... I can't even countenance why Ricky Gervais thinks that is a subject for comedy.
Well, I suppose you'd have to ask him about that. But I think, I haven't heard the joke either. But I think what
he was talking about the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and he said, well, presumably a child, the terminally ill child, would make a wish not to be terminally ill.
Is that not a joke actually at the expense of the Make-A-Wish Foundation?
No, because he does lots of work for them. He does very valuable work for the charity.
Often
it just wasn't a subject for joking.
No, often there's an element with stand-up where the performer is satirising themselves and their own gaucheness.
No. Now you're making excuses. Oh, he inhabits a character.
Look, you don't go and see stand-up, so you don't know much about it, but I'm telling you, there is a kind of theatricality about it. We had a similar thing with Mike Ward, the Canadian comedian, who made a joke about the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He ended up in court over that joke. And I just kind of think, we've got to give some leeway for the clowns in society to say the unacceptable. And we take our own responsibility of not going to see them.
Why? What does that actually achieve by him saying that about terminally ill children? You tell me.
Well, you're talking very specifically about one specific joke that you take offence to.
I do.
But do you realise that any joke that any comedian says could elicit the same response from another individual, in which case there is no way that a comedian could write a routine. If the criteria is no one can be offended, there is no...
my criteria is some topics are off limits for comedy.
Who decides on those topics?
Off limits.
Do you decide on those topics? This is my point. There are some
I am the kingmaker.
No, but there are some people...
I don't think there's much...
There are some people
well, I don't think there's much that's funny about the Holocaust.
What if it's a Jewish comic that lived through the Holocaust making it, of which there were many, and actually dying down?
I've heard Jewish comics make Holocaust jokes. Now, I think that would upset me if family members of mine died in the Holocaust, but who am I to say what that comic can joke about?
I think it's legitimate for you to react to it. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not trying in favour of cancelling people and saying you can't say this. I am saying it's perfect. You know, if you're going to say something that could be offensive and people find it offensive, then you've got to take that up. You've got to soak up the criticism.
Well, Matthew, what about this as a good solution? Any comic can say whatever they want, and anyone can criticise them for saying it if they want.
That works.
That, I think, is a good. That's how a free society works, I think. Anyway, look, we've got to move on. But coming up, we've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 with a full reaction from my brilliant panel, plus their heroes and villains of 2023. But next, as it's announced, the UN have sent 153 migrants to Rwanda, despite thwarting Britain's own deal and telling us Rwanda is not safe. Is this an instance of hypocrisy? We'll be discussing that in just a moment.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. Now, it's been revealed that the United Nations has sent 153 asylum seekers to Rwanda, even though they opposed Britain's own scheme to send migrants to the country. Officials in Rwanda let the cat out of the bag, announcing they'd welcome scores of people from Libya under a United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees programme. But just 3 months ago, the UN hired a legal team to set out its grave concerns about the UK's Rwanda plan. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, said the UN scheme highlighted Rwanda's hospitality, capability and commitment to hosting refugees. While Tory party Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson said, "It is hypocrisy of the highest level. Either Rwanda is safe or it is not." Now, Matthew Laza is still with us to discuss this alongside the political commentator Alex Armstrong. Alex, do you agree with Lee Anderson on this one?
I couldn't agree more with him. And I think the public want to know why it's safe for the United Nations and why they think that it's a safe country to send refugees to, but not safe for the UK to do so. It's utterly bonkers. In fact, I saw a tweet today from the Rwanda refugees' own Twitter account, which is part of the UNHCR, saying that Rwanda is a safe and welcoming country and that people are thriving there.
Yes.
So I'm totally lost for words.
OK, Matthew, it is true also, isn't it, that the Rwandan government is quite offended by the prospect that it's not a safe country? I mean, this isn't going down particularly well there.
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, you know, what offends the Rwandan government doesn't really interest me very much. What interests me is that we sort the migration crisis out and that we treat people fairly. The two things are not mutually contradictory. Rwanda has tens of thousands of refugees there from elsewhere in Africa, and actually the Rwandan government has treated them well, and there are endless UN reports saying that. So this is basically an absolutely artificial
Why are the UN sending
because the question is, they're sending the migrants there because they have nowhere else to go. This is not people who've appeared on the shores of Britain who should be processed in Britain and sent back to their original country if they're found not to be here. There's a particular issue with the objection by the UNHCR to what the British government proposed, which is that of most of the refugees that and of course let's remind ourselves not a single person has been sent from Britain, but the people who will be sent from Britain are likely to be from a handful of countries, including Syria and other countries in the Middle East. And what basically happens in Rwanda is, in the Rwandan system of processing people, 97% of people from those countries are sent back, whereas at the moment in Britain, 97% of people from those countries are allowed to stay. And that's what alarmed the UNHCR within the process of reviewing the British policy.
So, Alex, isn't that a fair point, that it's actually unsafe? When someone has fled a country because they might be persecuted or tortured or whatever, and then they just get sent back again, maybe that's why Rwanda is unsafe.
But this is the whole point of the Rwanda deal. It was to establish rules via the British government and the Rwandan government through a deal that says we won't do that.
Right.
So it doesn't say that, though. It doesn't say. It doesn't tell the Rwandan government it's got to keep a certain percentage or send a certain percentage back. It does say it's got to follow a certain procedure. But if the result of that procedure is literally the opposite of what the result of the procedure here, then that's what alarms people.
But I think it still goes back to the main point. Why are the UN sending refugees there? Why do they declare it as safe? People of similar backgrounds, similar religions. Why are they declaring it as safe?
Almost all the people the UN has sent there are not from those countries.
But I think if we're looking at the way in which the media and the press and politicians on the left have described this Rwanda plan as unsafe. Rwanda is an unsafe country. People shouldn't go there. Refugees shouldn't go there. It's completely...
Nobody has ever said that Rwanda is unsafe for everybody.
No,
not for everybody.
Loads of Labour MPs have said Rwanda is not a safe country.
No, it's not a safe country for some people, and that is absolutely true.
Matthew, do you object to the notion of offshore solutions to asylum?
It depends what we mean by offshore solutions. The Australian system, I'm partly Australian, the Australian system was people were dealt with under Australian law on what was basically the equivalent of Jersey, rather less rich, but islands off the Australian coast. Unless we do want to stick people in Jersey or the Isle of Man, or as Tony Blair suggested, as we've revealed this week, on the Isle of Mull,
that's interesting. I mean, New Labour were floating this a while ago. So
if offshore processing is what's going to happen, for example, the deal that's been done in Albania, where with the Italian government, where people are processed by the Italian system, they are dealt with by Italian judges, but they happen to be sitting in Albania just across the sea from Italy. That alarms me less than a scheme which is about shipping people to be dealt with under somebody else's law, and that's the difference.
But then I think that completely goes against the idea of sovereignty and having our government process people in a different country. I don't agree with that. I think that really raises questions about whether we're imposing this sort of colonial-style governmental system on Rwanda. If we're putting them over to Rwanda, we have to make
I'm not suggesting we do that in Rwanda. I'm suggesting that we...
we do that with any other country in the world, and it's the same issue, right? You could send them to Germany and say they're not safe in Germany for X, Y, Z reasons. You could send them to Britain and say they're not safe. Jews aren't safe in Britain anymore because of what's going on in the streets here. There's plenty of arguments to be made that Rwanda's not a safe country. But at the end of the day, the United Nations themselves are sending hundreds of people there. And not only that, Andrew, we're also spending millions of pounds. We are the 5th biggest contributor. We spend $500 million every 5 years funding the United Nations, only to have their legal team slap us in the face.
So, but isn't the problem not necessarily that the Rwanda solution isn't fit for purpose? Isn't the problem that we have a migration crisis? And maybe if we solve that, rather than trying to sort of farm out these people to various other countries.
Well, how do we solve this crisis? We can't stop people coming over on the boats. It's clear to see the only thing that's stopping...
There's a lot more we can do. We can smash the gangs.
Smash the gangs. I mean, I've heard this phrase back to back. Someone tell me how Labour are going to smash
the gangs. Well, let's find out, Matthew, because I am interested, because Labour seem to say that they've got the silver bullet on this, and they keep talking about how they will sort this problem out of the small boats. Because they're being very vague on.
No, not being vague. I mean, the two principal parts of smashing the gangs, which is one, which the Tories have had 13 years to do it and haven't done it, is use anti-terrorism legislation, which would really help the police and border force, and would mean that they would give a real boost to smashing the gangs. The second one is setting up a new cross-border police force, but the Tories won't do it for ideological reasons.
So they're not interested in it. They're not. The problem is on the other side of the border.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
What do you want us to do? Go have Met Police in France?
Yeah, actually, I'd like yes to have.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've already been funding.
No, we haven't been doing that. No, we haven't. We've been writing blank checks to the French government. That's not true.
Well, then what would you do about it? Because, as you say, the origin of the problem is in France.
Yes.
They are not dealing with the criminal gangs over there, right? So how do you deal with them?
We need a strong deterrence, and I actually think that's what parts of this bill. I'm not saying the Rwanda bill is perfect, by the way. I would like to see a lot more done to it. I do think
you see this as a deterrent.
Yes, it will be, because if illegal immigrants are coming to the country and they're seeing their rights, you are never going to get citizenship. You are never going to be allowed to stay in this country. You will be shipped off. They will stop because they will see it as a dead end.
There's no evidence for that.
Well, it's just semantics. It's just human nature, isn't it? You're not going to go somewhere and waste all your money and time going somewhere you know you won't be able to stay.
Because at most 1,000 people are going to be sent to Rwanda. At most, no, absolutely not. At most 1,000 people are going to be sent to Rwanda. What we need is a system that works, so you don't have applications piling up, which the Tories have completely failed to do, which is why they're spending so much money on hotels.
I mean, it's a
complete failure of a system, and Rwanda is not. Rwanda's not the answer.
And the Tories haven't solved it.
It absolutely didn't, because we sorted the problem, because we got the Sangat camp closed in Calais, because we actually worked with our European partners to do it. The Tories have just been taken for a ride.
OK, well, look, it's getting very heated. I don't think we're going to agree tonight. So let's move on. But coming up in just a moment, we've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 with a full reaction from my brilliant panel, plus their heroes and villains of 2023. Thank you both for the debate.
Pleasure.
Do not go anywhere.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. It is 10:30, so it's time to look at tomorrow's front pages. So we're going to start with the Sunday Express. PM, more tax cuts to come. We've got the Observer here, which is Starmer lacks clear sense of purpose, says ex-policy chief. The Sunday Telegraph is leading with a number 10 plan to expose Labour debt risks. And the Sunday Times, they've got Starmer beats Sunak head-to-head, say poll. He's been doing that for a while, hasn't he? Let's move on to the next one. This is The Sun on Sunday. Emily baby joy, in between a star to have a baby with new love. And moving on to the Daily Star now. Happy booze year. We will down 50 million drinks tonight, apparently. Speak for yourself. Let's get my reaction from my panel here. Well, let's start with the Sunday Express. Rishi saying more tax cuts to come. Well, this is good news. Emma, what do you think of this?
Well, there's a surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, how many different policies have we had floated around, dangled in front of our noses over the past week? It's that crazy time between Christmas and New Year, where politicians seem to lose the plot completely. Starmer was offering us free childcare for everybody in the early years, like a few days ago.
Yes.
Then we had the resurgence of slashing inheritance, abolishing inheritance tax, and now we've got more tax cuts to come.
But not inheritance
tax. At some
tax.
point, he'll get off the Coke Zero or whatever he's, the thing that he dances around and drinks in 10 Downing Street, and they'll come back down to earth and realise that they've got to actually cost some of these policies.
But aren't tax cuts good for winning the electorate round?
Of course they are.
I should say an electorate that are quite sceptical of Rishi Sunak.
Quite sceptical, of all politicians, but particularly the Tories.
Yes.
They've got their spring budget looming. They are very clearly, both parties, on an election footing. Labour especially really talking up the chances of an early election in May, which I think is probably for the birds, but So this is just more dangling.
What do you think, Benedict?
Alhamdulillah is my response to this. It's a fantastic news, and I'll believe it when I see it.
Right,
It's one of those things where, as you were saying, in conjunction with the prospect of an early general election, you're almost sort of thinking, are the Tories going to massively overpromise how many taxes they're going to cut, not necessarily costing everything, and go, but you can only have these if you vote for us right now. It's going to be a really short period of time, because right now, all we've got are promises and ideas. There's nothing concrete.
Is there anything that Rishi can do to win this next election?
I think probably not, but I think that sort of this random dangling of different tax cuts on different days, which then don't happen, is absolutely desperate. I mean, with the inheritance... So this story is about helping millions in their pay packet, which implies that it isn't inheritance tax, which therefore means that the dangling of a tax cut 3 days ago is now being taken away again, and you're being dangled with a different tax cut, because they certainly can't afford both, even if they can afford either. So it's just... It's all talk and no... delivery.
So it's dangling for everyone. Because they were going
Christmas
to give...
baubles, everyone.
Well, you can't do that, can you?
And the elderly were going to benefit from the inheritance tax. And also the young, the first-time buyers, they were all going to get homes as well.
I think this is a pushback, because I think the inheritance tax cuts, which affects 5% of households, they realised that it may have done well to try and save the blue wall, but if you're in the red wall, it meant absolutely nothing.
And it saves Rishi about 300 million,
I just want to move on to the Observer now. The Observer's got this headline, Starmer lacks clear sense of purpose, says ex-policy chief. This is John Crudders, who has written a book. Really, this is a bit of a plug for his book, for The Observer. This is a book called A Century of Labour. I mean, I'm going to come to you on this, Matthew, first, because I would have thought that, well, he's got a point. Labour, it feels like a very middle-class party. I mean, the clue is in the name. Does someone like Starmer really represent working-class interests? Haven't they sort of alienated the left of the party?
Well, I wouldn't say that the left of the party represented working-class interests. As somebody who sat in the meetings of the Corbynists, I've yet to meet a working-class member of Momentum, as they were the most middle-class people, even in a middle-class party I've ever met.
Corbyn really succeeded in making the Labour Party as middle-class as possible.
Exactly.
Which was weird, wasn't
it? Exactly. So I don't equate... I totally agree. I don't equate the left being the representatives of the working class. Look, I think politics has a problem in terms of people being in tune with that. We need more working-class voices. Angela Rayner, with a genuine, working-class background, not having to sort of, dig out a grandfather as a miner to make it... she gets castigated all the time. John Crudders was the policy chief when I was at the centre of the Labour Party, and I like John a lot.
So he's a mate?
Well, no, he's not a mate, because John takes a slightly aloof and cynical and analytical perspective, and this is obviously to push his book. I mean, of course, Keir would say he is working, he comes from a working class background, as he tells it in every speech he mentions his dad worked in a factory. Yes, absolutely, although he did go to management in the end.
Didn't he own the factory?
No, he certainly didn't own the factory, but he did get promoted to management or to supervisory role halfway through.
Wasn't Starmer asked to define working class the other day, and he really couldn't do it?
Well, and the problem is everybody, and every poll, everybody says they're working class, even the middle classes, because we all want to think
worked in a factory, but he was
class.
actually a captain of industry.
I mean, he genuinely wasn't a captain of industry, but, you know...
Benedict, I mean,
you've got a mental image of a young Keir Starmer there in knickerbockers with his father with a top hat, looking at all of this going, look how working.
If you were a captain of industry, you don't name your kid Keir, to be fair.
But you're not a fan, are you, of Starmer?
John Crudders? Oh, I think Keir Starmer is a brighter politician than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he is further to the left ideologically than a lot of people give him credit for. It is because he is smart that he keeps a lot of this under wraps. He was not meant to be Prime Minister. He was meant to detoxify the Labour Party in the aftermath of the Corbyn years. He was not expecting to be walking into this situation.
But you say that's smart. Isn't it better for the electorate that all of the politicians tell us what they actually think rather than we have to try and work out what they actually think?
No, don't be ridiculous. Well, if they told us what we actually think, then nobody would vote for them. I think we've got to remember
it's very cynical.
He has tried to detoxify the party, and he's done a very good job when it comes to things like anti-Semitism, but there is still, I think, a residual suspicion, or at least within the party, certain aspects, there is a fear that parts of the electorate still cling on to what was the Corbyn years and don't necessarily trust them. And that's why I think that they are being very cautious in terms of not putting out any sort of particularly wild policy. I also think that they understand the economic situation that they're going to inherit, through no fault of their own, is going to be disastrous. And they will not be given the same amount of time that the Tories have been given. They won't be given the same amount of patience. It will be a really hard slog. They won't be able to turn around in 5 years' time if it's been as bad as it has been.
Yes.
And say, well, you gave the Tories 13 years. People will go, well, that's tough.
I mean, you're saying he's more left-leaning than people give him credit for, but this book seems to be suggesting that he's not really tethered to the traditionalist values of the Labour Party.
The Labour Party likes to fight itself, and it likes to do it that very dirty.
There's one big thing about him, which is actually he's not that political, which, before everybody starts laughing, is most people in politics spend their life in politics.
Yes.
I've sat in meetings where, or I've been told about meetings where he's not known people who were cabinet ministers under Blair and Brown, because rather than being a special advisor in the Blair and Brown governments like most of the people around the shadow cabinet table, he was busy being the chief prosecutor. So he's not... I know what Crudders means, that he's not sort of... He hasn't spent his life in those internal Labour battles.
He's not a politico.
Emma, let's get your view on this.
That's much better.
Do you think that Starmer himself is not the right person to lead the Labour Party?
Exactly.
Is that what you think?
Well, to me, I think he's failed to make any impact at all, and, you know, it's better to make some kind of impression on people than none. And I think it's interesting what John Crudders is saying. He's saying, well, he's clearly a decent, principled man. He remains an elusive leader, difficult to find.
Yes.
And it does feel as though Starmer, for all his probably admirable qualities, just has not made any impression on the
that's
public.
interesting. That's interesting.
His vision.
This actually Sunday Times.
He hasn't set out a vision. He hasn't set out many policies either.
Emma, the Sunday Times headline actually has this: Starmer beats Sunak head-to-head. Says poll. This is 32%.
But to me, that's
32% prefer the Labour leader. 22% back PM. That's not. I mean, you say that he's
no,
a
I know, but that
bad
very
leader,
much to me is a failure of Sunak, because he's so unpopular, rather than that Starmer has in any way impressed people. And I would suspect, I haven't read it in detail, I would suspect that question is, do you prefer one or the other?
But isn't that in Sunak's own constituency?
Yeah, which is bad, which is very bad. It's appalling. But this is bad news for Sunak. But what I'm saying is I think this is probably a question of, do you prefer Starmer or Sunak?
Yeah, but he's got 27,000 majority, but he won't have that for Tory. I mean, but this is bizarre.
It's not a key target.
This is bizarre to me, because one of the recent polls sort of found that even the kind of die-hard Tory voters of old, that even they, now it's a slight majority, don't really support or are sceptical about the Conservative Party. They can't even keep their own voters on side. Benedict, is there any hope for them?
I mean, no.
But they're not really Conservative, are they?
No, but for this general election, I think this is gone, and it's going to be this sort of the browbeating and the sort of the defenestration that comes afterwards, and we might see what emerges from the ashes. But I mean, in one sense, actually, John Crudders is correct. Keir Starmer is an elusive leader. He's so far out of sight of Keir Starmer that, you know, completely elusive. And it's very impressive, given that he has next to no personality. But ultimately, what this comes down to...
I mean, it is true.
Yeah, it does. But ultimately, what this comes down to is not necessarily about being a big character, because we've been through the big characters. Be it Cameron, be it Boris, be it Tony Blair. It was all about personality. Actually, it hasn't had a very good track record. What they want now is a sense of quiet competence, and you have to say, by also pushing other people to the forefront, be it Rachel Reeves, be it especially, I think, Wes Streeting, who talks a very good game on the NHS. He's given a sort of a collegiate approach, saying, it's not just about me, I'm not the big man, I can't give you that personality, I can give you this personality, and I can give you this woman.
In fairness to him, I'm sure he does have a personality, but he's not a performer. You know, we have this presidential style now, which, you know, we've had that since Blair, since Thatcher, really. And that's what we're used to.
I mean, just think, you know, we may well have the debates coming up. If we have a mayor election in literally a few weeks' time, can you imagine the debates between, you know, they're not going to set the world alight between Sunak, Ed Davey, who we must get a quick mention into, and Keir. You know, none of whom would, you know, even their best friends were saying they're not performers in the, you know, Cameron, Johnson, Blair mould.
So we want more Trump.
I was going to say, that might suit the Tories if it bores everybody.
Do you think this is really about personality at this point in politics? You know, that's what we're looking for.
I think it'll all come down to what Tory voters do. I think, like me, there are so many disaffected, homeless, like Tories not knowing where to put their votes.
Well,
so
they might go reform.
Yeah, exactly. Many, maybe up to 10% go reform, and then we're going to calamitously split the vote. So it's really, really hard to call, isn't it?
Although isn't the split vote quite a good
Or do they stay home? I think turnout will be a massive issue, a massive sort of decider as well.
Won't this be good for the Conservative Party in a way, because now they're being punished at the polls?
Yes, they're being punished, and they may well face up, you know, a decade out of power, or never come back at all, as William Hague said, because the landscape has shifted so much. But I think that will be the decider, rather than any former Tories rushing to vote for Starmer.
Do we have any time to have a look at one more paper? We've got the Daily Star Happy Booze Year. Apparently, we're going to drink 50 million drinks tonight on the wildest New Year's Eve for a decade.
Is that that's tomorrow? This is tomorrow.
These are tomorrow's papers. Sorry, yes.
So it's unless you do it every night. Let's just remind everyone, this is New Year's Eve.
Yes.
Tomorrow night.
Yes, tomorrow night, exactly. But if you are drinking tonight, then fair play.
Get 49 million tonight.
But just 49 million.
Pre-drinking.
That's not news, though, is it? I mean, don't they do this every New Year's Eve, don't they?
They.
Yeah.
Them.
As in the people
that don't work. The people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm at work, I can't drink. No. So what do you think?
I think it sounds about right. I mean, how many people are there in the country?
But that's like saying everybody on Christmas Day, on their Christmas dinner, eats 7,000 calories. Well, I don't know.
They do.
Do they?
Absolutely.
Some people probably do.
Demonstrably proven.
Yes,
Everybody eats 7,000
Is it that bad?
The average Christmas dinner.
Does it matter that people one night a year...
Well, that's not even one drink each, is it?
No.
That's the point.
That's right.
Well, it's for adults. But you've got to take the kids away.
I mean,
for 60 million.
In France or Italy, this wouldn't be a problem.
No, absolutely. Well, I think even in France, that 3-year-olds might. I'm interested why we're going to have a bigger and boozier New Year this New Year than in over the last few years. Bearing in mind the cost of living crisis.
Because of broken Britain, we're all depressed.
Or maybe that's because of the cost of living crisis, people are drinking.
I love headlines like this. I always feel how great I'm going to feel on New Year's Day morning. Well, not really getting up at 4 in the morning, but anyway. And
why? Because you'll not be drinking.
Because I'll be working.
Yeah.
And how rubbish they'll feel. How smug and clear-headed and healthy I'll feel.
I'll be fine. I'll still be drunk from the night before. I don't plan on going to sleep. That's ultimately the two different types of approach right here.
OK, well, coming up, more of tomorrow's newspaper front page. We've still got the Mail and the Mirror to look at, with some live reaction in the studio from tonight's brilliant panellists. And they'll be nominating their heroes and villains of 2023. See you in a moment.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. It's time for some more of tomorrow's front pages. So we've got the Mail here, and they're leading with a story, 5-day work-from-home deals for pampered mandarins. Apparently, Whitehall civil servants are getting a deal where they can basically work from home 5 days a week. Pretty astonishing stuff. And then the Mirror is leading with this one. 175,000 asked, why do the Royals exist? This is a poll that the Mirror is running. So you'll have to read the Mirror if you want to know the result. OK, well, let's have a quick chat about this story about the civil service. I mean, this is an interesting one, Matthew. Working from... This is just in the wake of the pandemic, isn't it? People have just got so used to being at home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's happened, because we've gone from Jacob Rees-Mogg of this parish going around putting notes on empty desks saying, you know, we expect to see you back, or, you know, you need to do 5 days a week in the office, through to apparently people can be offered permanent work-from-home contracts. I mean, this is what Benedict was saying earlier. This is the Tories getting upset and, you know, crying out the next item in the culture war, the next woke atrocity, when they're in charge. They run the civil service, they're signing this off, Tory ministers are signing this off. It's ridiculous.
Is it the case that civil servants, Benedict, can work from home with equal effectiveness?
Something that actually needs to be borne in mind is that there isn't the office space for all the civil servants that we currently have on the rolls.
Yes.
That needs to be taken into account. Now, obviously, that doesn't justify some people on permanent 5-day work-from-home contracts, but I'm not necessarily opposed to the concept of working from home, where you can make it work. I think that it is potentially a very good idea, a good way of, if you like, decentralising the concentration of power in Westminster, in central London, of just having people having to work very specifically in certain parts of Whitehall. If you can get people elsewhere in other parts of the country where they are regularly
Are they doing that here, though?
I don't know
really
if they are,
that.
but I think that if this was what we were trying to push forward with, and we were sort of embracing technology, I do think that this is part of the future. And I think that if you are able to, if you like, spread out all of your options and have people across the country actually working, if they are able to work in that capacity. There are some jobs that people can't do, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I also look to the fact that, you know, we have so many towns and cities and villages in this country that are sort of being depopulated because young people are just being dragged into London and Manchester and Birmingham.
Yeah.
And you think if we can make it easier actually for the country to be more broadly better populated with younger people working and, you know, contributing to those communities, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You look at countries like Italy or Spain where entire villages have just been emptied of people because there are no jobs for them there. And you think, well, we have the technology to allow people to stay there and keep working. Why don't we embrace it?
Well, if that were the impulse behind this decision, then maybe that would be fair enough. I don't think it is, though. I think something else is happening here, isn't it, Emma?
And I think the key word in this headline, the deals for pampered mandarins, is pampered. I think we have to remember that working from home is an absolute luxury, that many normal people that do normal jobs, stacking shelves, cleaning our streets,
presenting
looking after
programmes on GB News, you know?
coming into television
I can't do
studios.
it from home, can I?
Well, no. Looking after our elderly, looking after our babies, all of that kind of stuff, looking after people in hospital. They can't work from home. They don't have the option of working from home. Only yesterday, the headline in the, and I can't remember which paper it was about civil servants being over-promoted in order to bust this pay freeze thing that they've had. So they were being overpaid and over-promoted while still demanding 3 days a week from home.
So is it just a culture in the civil
service? I think we need to
service?
decide what we think about working from home. Is it skiving, or are you actually doing your job? Is there any control over these people? Are they just demanding this?
Well, I mean,
that's
that's what
here?
we don't know. But I would say that there does seem to be a culture within the civil service where the workers get what they want, the staff members get what they want. I mean, we had this, as I mentioned, the whistleblower earlier saying that you know, basically the staff decide what policies get approved and what don't. No, we've had talk from the Tories for years about a bonfire of the Quangos, and they'll sort out the civil service. There will be reform to the civil service. Never actually happens, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Which is testimony to the power of the civil service.
But of course, you've got to... well, exactly. It is what actually is the state. It's what runs the state. And if you decide you're going to go up against it, you need to have a very, you know, a strong plan. You need to be very sort of vigorous, and you need to not go to war with your own party every couple of years, because actually everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet. This is something that does require fundamental root and branch reform across many aspects of it. And the Conservatives, as much as they've talked a good game, they've not been prepared for 1 second. The only person who actually came in with a semblance of a plan was Dominic Cummings, and he was the worst possible person to try to implicate that plan because he alienated absolutely everybody.
Well, the Sunday Times tells us that he may be coming back. The PM's in secret talks with him. That'll be the story that...
I hope so. And if the Trump and Cummings, like, the job in my life...
That'll be what's getting the political class talking on their New Year's Eve. They'll definitely need an extra drink tomorrow.
OK, I mean, I would say that we don't know that is very much an allegation at the moment.
It's the Sunday Times speculation.
It's a speculation, so let's not get too excited.
It is quite serious. It is quite serious. It is quite serious because when you have the Blob or the civil service allegedly blocking new ideas, new policies, and saying that's not the way we do things here. No, that's not what. You know, you end up with problem. You end up with any government. Yeah, they're meant to be impartial, but any government that does come up with interesting ideas or levelling up ideas or transport ideas or anything new, you have old hands there going, no, it's not the way we do it here, and it just gets blocked.
Unbelievable. OK, well, we're going to move on because it's time to look at my panel's heroes and villains of 2023. Emma, do you want to start with your hero?
Yeah, King Charles. I'm not a monarchist particularly, but I think that he gave us one single moment in this country to be proud of in this depressing and defeated and broken Britain.
And that's the coronation, presumably?
Yeah.
OK, not his King's speech on Christmas Day.
King's speech was good. COP28 speech was good. I've been proud of him and pretty much nothing else in this country.
Fair enough. Shall we move on to yours, Benedict?
Mine is Javier Milei, the new president of Argentina, who I think is a phenomenal breath of fresh air. I don't necessarily agree with all of his politics, but for a man to stand up on stage in Argentina and praise Margaret Thatcher as a great leader and to win pretty convincingly, I think that's pretty heroic.
So he also stood up with a chainsaw.
He did. A very different kind of my old man was a toolmaker approach than Keir Starmer had. Just a power tool instead.
Yes.
But, you know, he's
You'll be on headliners with jokes like that.
He follows through with his claims about, you know, deregulating the economy, about cutting different government ministries. Well, he's not been in power for very long, but he's getting on with it. We like gumption in this kind of circles. That's what you want to see, action, rather than 13 years of a government going. It would be great if somebody changed.
Yeah, twiddly.
People really hate him.
That's what Keir Starmer's here for, to give us that.
The Guardian referred to him as a far-right libertarian Which seems like an oxymoron to me. But,
Yeah, well, that speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Doesn't it, I think?
OK, Matthew.
So mine is the 80s singer Fergal Sharkey, who's won plaudits this year for crusading against the greedy water companies who've been poisoning our rivers and the Tory Environment Secretaries who've stood by while they do it.
OK, God bless Fergal. OK, and let's run through the villains, Emma.
My villain, Elon Musk, for ruining what was quite a fun place called Twitter, renaming it X and just making it a complete nightmare now.
You think he's ruined it? How so?
It's not fun anymore. All I get is bombarded with ads. People I follow, people I follow, I don't see their tweets because there's an algorithm that arranges these things.
That's because he
It's just a
fired
nightmare.
everyone.
X is a nightmare, and it's become nastier and more and more and more abusive and divisive and horrible. It's just not a fun place to go and hang out anymore.
OK, what do you think, Ben?
And I don't know what to call it. Can't say I X'd.
No one calls
or
it
I posted it. Everyone calls it Twitter.
Everyone still calls it Twitter.
Yeah, but
What do I think about Twitter?
No, sorry, your villain.
My villain is Evgeny Prigozhin, the late Evgeny Prigozhin, the former head of the Wagner Group, because he is quite literally a villain. I mean, look at him. That is every Bond villain sort of distilled, put into a blender, and then put into a mould. And, you know, even his way of going out was phenomenal. You know, leading a coup against Vladimir Putin, you know, actually almost garnering sympathy for Vladimir Putin, and then failing, because that's what all villains do, and then getting himself blown up in a plane accident.
You've got to go all the way if you're going to do something like that. Okay, we've got to very quickly, Matthew.
Yeah, mine's Just Stop Oil with their crazy campaign of so-called direct action, which has put the backs up of any and destroyed support for the sensible cause. So bad tactics, sensible cause, making it harder for those of us who want to combat climate change.
OK, well, thank you all for that. If I have to choose, I think I'll go with you, Matthew, with Fergal Sharkey, just because he's from Derry, but also because he was in the Undertones, who were a great band, but also his work as well, his campaigning. And as for the villain, yes, I think Just Stop Oil, absolutely. There's a real problem with them, isn't there? Because they do tend to alienate the very people that should be trying to persuade.
Exactly.
And they keep going after works of art, which I really wish they wouldn't. OK, well, thanks ever so much for watching the show. Really appreciate it. Do stick around for headliners. That's coming up next. That's the Paper Preview Show with comedians.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to New Year's Eve, for most of us, we're going to end 2023 on a fairly showery note, and for some in the south, it's still going to be pretty blustery. So as we end Saturday, we've still got this area of low pressure really dominating proceedings. This cold front will continue to spread its way eastward across the country. Some fairly heavy rain on it and some strong and gusty winds. It will become quite slow moving across the very far north of Scotland as we go through the course of the night. And then behind it, it is a mixture of clear spells and a scattering of showers. In the clearer skies, it will turn quite chilly, but I think most of us frost-free away from Scotland. So into New Year's Eve, any overnight rain will quickly clear the far east of England, and for many of us it's a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. Some of the showers, especially come the afternoon, will be heavy and thundery, but the rain across the very far north of Scotland, especially for Shetland, really just staying there all day. For many, a slightly cooler day than today, but still not doing too badly for the time of year. Looking ahead to New Year's Day, for many northern areas, it's a mixture of some bright spells, but a scattering of showers once again. Further south, a much drier and brighter day. A brief respite in the weather before, unfortunately, further rain comes in later on in the day, and that sets us up for a fairly unsettled few days as we start 2024.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news